Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the second of this semester's Book Talk programs, sponsored by the program in African American Studies here at Wake Forest University. My name is Corey D.B. Walker. I'm Dean of the School of Divinity, Wake Forest Professor of the Humanities, and Director of the program in African American Studies. And on behalf of our unique and distinctive intellectual community, we want to welcome you to what promises to be an informative, thought-provoking, and inspiring program. We're going to begin with introducing our guest for this afternoon. And one way of introducing Dr. Daniel Black is by introducing you to his viral commencement speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, our 2024 Commencement Convocation Orator, Dr. Daniel Black.
Here they come, y'all, here they come. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Doctors, lawyers, writers, business owners, teachers, healers, rappers, preachers. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Psychologists and sociologists and anthropologists and ethnomusicologists and paleontologists. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Anesthesiologists and cosmetologists, dermatologists and embryologists, ontologists, epidemiologists, ophthalmologists, radiologists, blackologists. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Computer scientists, mechanical engineers, nurses, architects, radio, television, film producers, economists, accountants, marketing executives, chemists, business analysts. Here they come, y'all, here they come. Musicians, mathematicians, astronauts, philosophers, pharmacists, dentists, historians, speech therapists, HR specialists, painters, dancers, actors, janitors, street sweepers, post office workers, plumbers, electricians, paramedics, bakers, construction workers, hairdressers, insurance agents, librarians, veterinarians, humanitarians. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. The dream of the slave, the hope of the angels, the promise of the ancestors, the answers to grandmama's prayers, the guarantee of granddaddy's work. Here they come, y'all, here they come. The cure to cancer is sitting right here. The antidote for sickle cell anemia is sitting right here. The great negotiator of war and peace is sitting right here. The next generation of black billionaires is sitting right here. Here they come, y'all. Here they come. Listen.
Here he comes. Daniel Black is an award-winning novelist, professor, activist, mentor, and yes, public speaker. His published works include They Tell Me of Home, The Sacred Place, Perfect Peace, 12 Gates to the City, The Coming, Listen to the Lambs, Don't Cry for Me, and Black on Black. In 2014, he won the Distinguished Writers Award from the Mid-Atlantic Writers Association. The Go On Girl National Book Club named him Author of the Year in 2011 for his best-selling novel, Perfect Peace. Perfect Peace was also chosen as the 2014 selection for If All Arkansas Read the Same Book by the Arkansas Center for the Book at the Arkansas State Library. The novel has been reprinted more than 10 times and is being heralded as an American literary classic. Dr. Black has been nominated 3 times for the Townsend Literary Prize, the Ernest J. Gaines Award, the Pharaoh Grumbly Literary Prize, the Lambda Literary Award, the Georgia Author of the Year Prize, and the Mark Twain American Voice Prize in Literature Award. In 2015, Dr. Black's The Coming was published to broad critical acclaim. The novel is a first-hand account of the trauma and triumph of Africans aboard a slave ship in the 16th century. Reviewers called this work brilliant, poetic, and a literary homage to the lives of those Africans tossed into the sea. Dr. Black's work has been justly celebrated. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Alice Walker says about his book, Perfect Peace, "It's a spellbinding novel that kept me reading late into several nights. A young boy raised as a girl until she was 8 years old, and then forced to be a boy. It is a gift to have so much passion, so much love, so much beautiful writing, so flawlessly faithful to the language of ancestors who grappled as best they could with more than they could ever understand. The novel will one day be a film that will benefit us much if it is done well." National Book Award winner Charles Johnson says, "The Coming is powerful and brilliant." He goes on to state, "This is a work to be proud of." In 2016, Dr. Black's long-awaited novel, Listen to the Lambs, was released. This novel explores the lives and agency of unhoused people who find each other on the street and create lives of meaning without material substance. Dr. Black was born as a native of Kansas City, Kansas, but spent his formative years in rural Blackwell, Arkansas. He graduated from Clark College, where he earned the prestigious Oxford Modern British Studies Fellowship and studied abroad at the University of Oxford. He was then awarded a full fellowship to Temple University, where he studied with Black Arts Movement Poet Laureate Sonia Sanchez, and in 1992 earned his PhD in African American Studies. Dr. Black has spent the majority of his 30 academic years as a professor of African American Studies at his beloved alma mater, Clark Atlanta University. Please join me in welcoming to Wake Forest University, Dr. Daniel Black. I thought we would begin with a reflection on what we just saw. That commencement speech.
Yes.
That has now been viewed millions of times
That's right.
across the nation and across the world. Talk to us about that moment and its legacy.
I don't know that a human being could have been more nervous than I was that day. For several reasons. First of all, hey everybody. Because, and I found this out maybe 2 days before. This was the first time in Clark Atlanta history that a faculty member has ever been invited to give the commencement address, right? And I guess that's generally true at most schools. Generally on commencement day, it's not faculty who speak, it's some person of great notoriety and all of that who can bring, I guess what people think of as money to the university, right? So of course, Biden was at Morehouse, Angela Bassett was at Spelman, and then little me at Clark, right? And people had written notes to the president of Clark saying, you know, I don't mean any harm, but who the hell is Daniel Black? You know, we're coming all the way for graduation, and is this the best, you know, CLU has, this nameless person, right, you know? So I was out jogging maybe 3 days before the commencement exercise, and I said, God, you have got to do something. You got to do something. You got to give me something that's really going to speak to the hearts of these graduates. That's what I wanted more than anything. I really wanted to make Clark students so excited about having graduated from that institution. Yeah. Right? And I wanted to make them so unapologetically happy about being Black and intelligent, right? And so it all just came to me. It all just kind of flooded. And it was out while I was out running. And I had to literally run home because I didn't want to lose it. And I ran to the house and I opened my computer and it all just flooded from my head right into the computer. And when I finished, I heard in my spirit, leave it alone. Don't touch it. Don't edit, don't touch it. I said, okay, then I'm ready, I'm done. And then we always have graduation at 8 a.m. I got up about 5:30 that Monday morning and I was like, God, is this gonna work? You know, and I didn't hear nothing. And I said, I think I'm just going for it. The great irony is a dear, dear, dear friend now had called me because she had read maybe The Coming or something and said, I'm in town. You know, what are you doing today? And I said, well, as fate would have it, I'm speaking at graduation. Why don't you come with me? Her name is Anjanou Ellis, right? And so Anjanou met me and we got there and again, folks were kind, but they seemed skeptical, right? But all the students were like, kill this motherfucker, Dr. Black, right? They were all like, hey, come on, Black, bring it. You know, I've taught half of them, right? So they're like, don't hold back, right? They're whispering this as I'm walking in the line, right? And they like, hey, Doc, you know? And I was like, I think I got y'all. Y'all help me out. Y'all help me, right? And so finally, when I first opened my mouth and said, here they come, y'all, here they come. And kids started roaring and they all the graduates started screaming and standing up. I was like, oh, I'm in the house now.
That's it.
I said, I'm in the house now. And they had given me 20, 25 minutes, and I think it's 14, right? And so by the time I got to the end, I said, God has done something magnificent here. God has done something just so incredible. Graduation ended about 11 o'clock, and it was about 4:45 before I got to my car. And I was walking the entire time. Literally, it was the most amazing thing because people were crying and weeping and wailing and students were literally wailing. I've just never seen anything like it. They were like, you have no idea the pride I have just to be Black today. I mean, it was just, that's where they were going, and it was just, and I couldn't just leave them, right? And so it was just a whole ritual all day. So it was really, really, really something incredible. Yeah.
Well, Black, I can tell you when I saw it, I wanted to call Greg. I wanted to call Dana.
Yeah.
I wanted all of us to get back together.
Oh, yes, sir.
Get back at
yes,
Howard.
sir. Yes, sir.
Get back at the Aquaba
Yes.
and just sit there.
Oh, yes. Dr. Norman was in the audience.
Oh my gracious.
Yes, 84 years old.
Yeah?
Yes. Sitting there just crying like a baby.
It was special.
Yes, sir. Have some of y'all seen it before today? Oh, okay.
Seen it more than once? Twice? Pass it around and say, hold up, we want a graduation speaker at Wake Forest like this. 3 times.
I can be hired.
I thought we would have a conversation that just moves through 3 of your books.
Sure.
And that conversation will deal with questions around history and memory, questions around politics in our contemporary moment, and then questions around the self and the individual. We will use for those 3 movements, reading from The Coming, a reading from Black on Black, and a reading from your latest, Isaac's Song. So first, from The Coming.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about questions of history and memory.
Yes, absolutely. All right. I like that book.
I think this was the one we assigned when we had you at Virginia Union for the first year class.
What year was that? Do you remember?
I think that was 2017.
It might have been.
So just to give you all a background, whatever university I'm at, Black comes. And finally, there was Atiba. He didn't care who brought him. He just didn't want to remain in the stall alone. not by himself, not with death. A night in that place would kill him for sure. He'd lived among his people, the Fawn, back in his village. He'd dwelled and suffered on the ship with kinsmen he'd learned to love. He'd sat with survivors in the wooden stable and decided to live. And now he couldn't imagine his life on his own, without someone to touch, someone's breathing to listen to, someone's word to settle his rage. Anyone, just not death. Death was a poor companion. He didn't talk much. He loved to taunt and mock the weak of heart. He had a way of shifting and moving that left others unsettled. Sometimes, without permission, he'd evoke laughter at the absurdity of life and suddenly take one's breath away. Just like that. No, he couldn't dwell with death. And who else was there? In the darkness of the night, he could feel ancestors and speak to them, but they wouldn't come. Death came easily. He came whenever summoned. He even came unsummoned. And he hated leaving alone. So Atiba begged God to send him somewhere, anywhere, just not back to the stall. The coming wrestles with the true complexities, the terror, but you also remind us of the very human and tragic dimensions of what goes on.
Yes.
Talk to us about writing this book, and it's been reprinted 10 times?
Oh, probably 14 or 15 now. Yeah. I'll say many things about this book. First of all, as you were reading, I was like, did I write something that beautiful? Wow. I wrote this book really for one reason. And this is my 31st year on faculty at Clark Atlanta. And I wrote this book because as I'm watching young people over the years, it seems as if young Black people have no real conception of the price that was paid for them. It seems as if they think Black life is cheap. Their language suggests they believe Black life is cheap. The quickness with which they can dishonor each other suggests they believe Black life is cheap. The careless way they can talk to me as a professor, right, suggests to me that they believe Black life is cheap. And so I wanted to write a book to remind a generation of Black folks in America just how unbelievably expensive Black life is and has been. And I decided to write about the Middle Passage because I think history, for the most part, steps over it. I also think that in many ways, it is a trauma that most of us do not want to conceive, because you have to walk through it so slowly. It's day by 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 day for 60 days, for 90 days, for 5 months, some of these journeys, and then for 400 years of it, right? And I began to wonder about all the ways in which African people transmute into Africana people on the ship, right? I think we become diasporic through the Middle Passage, right? And I asked the ancestors, and this is quite literally, I asked the ancestors if I could tell this story. And I felt like the ancestors asked me one thing. They said, it is not a story only of trauma, right? If you tell nothing but trauma, you're doing what all the other people have done. And what I realized is that there were a couple of major things wrong, a couple of major things missing historically. One is all the accounts I'd read about the Middle Passage, I never came across names, right? It was always cargo, right? These people were talked about just like they were a sack of flour, right? And I said, is there such thing as a people with no names? Where are they on the planet, right? And so I said, well, when I tell this story, I'm going to include the people's names. I'm going to include these Africans' names, which of course I did. And I had so many people who called me and said, just giving them names does the humanizing process, right? But many people also said, how in the world did you know their names? How could you possibly known their names? And I said, well, really it was quite easy, right? And this is really the ways in which white supremacy, right, has usurped black consciousness. I said, if I'm in 14th, 15th century England, tell me their names. You know their names, I do too. If I'm in 14th century England, people's names are John, Elizabeth, Francis, right? This is people's names, right? Claire, right? The same names that the people got who are over there now, right? And I said, so why in the world wouldn't we assume that African people would have had African names? It's really very simple, right? Why in the world would somebody in 15th century Benin be named Mark? You know that ain't right. You know, and so I said the only thing I had to really do, one of the things I had to research was where, of course, people were taken from. Once I got that, all I needed to know is what was the names in the region. That would be the names they had. So this is Kwabena, right? And this is Alatanga, and this is Chisanganda, and this is Obialo, right? And this is Damani, and this is Omotosho, and this is Yasantewa. Of course it is, right? And I have to tell you, as I began to write The Coming and was given these names and the meanings, I really felt like I saw ancestors weeping. Because it seemed to me that for the first time since the Middle Passage, someone told this story and credited the Africans who were actually in the bottom of those ships, right? So that's one thing, the names that I thought was important. Another thing that I thought was very important too was not to give the entirety of the Middle Passage experience over to white supremacy, right? So that you have people on this ship who are in love, right? Which again, it's really very simple. How in the world would you capture people for 400 years and none of them be in love? How's that possible? So it's like, how did we miss that? Because if we're not careful, even we as black people, we have historically embraced this narrative, not as a narrative of living ancestors who came here as complicated people, but as human beings who got captured, and once they captured, they lost everything. Not only is that not true, but it's the biggest lie ever told. We lost nothing by being enslaved and coming here. There were artifacts we could not bring, but we brought all of Africa with us. Right? And that's very important to understand. There's nothing in Africa we left behind. Everything we had in Africa is here in America, but it was transmuted because we didn't have the same materials. They weaved kente cloth, we pieced quilts. Right? They made succotash, we made dressing. You see, and the list goes on and on and on, right? They danced the ring shout, right? But any person knows, right? All you got to do is take a minute and go to the black church and you'd see it again. That's right. Right? And so I wanted to make sure that the Africa that came with our ancestors was clear in this text also. And then the third thing that I think is so very, very important is to see how you can get the beauty of black excellence in the midst of black trauma. Right? That trauma does not erase our ability to do excellence. See, for black people, God, excellence and trauma coexist. Right? Where you'll find trauma, if you look right, you'll find the excellence too. Right? Because so that even, in black segregated schools where, the rain was dripping through, dilapidated roof, but those children were reading. Right? They might have been 50 kids in a classroom and one teacher, and you could hear a pin drop. You're talking about classroom management, right? We could do it, right? But it's because the physical plant or the physical nature of the school, right, wasn't the people's first value. The people's first value was the character of the children, right? And so I wanted to write a story where the trauma was obvious, but where the excellence shined even more brightly. And so in this story, The Coming, I pray that I've done that. With My Insane Self, I'm almost finished with The Second Coming. Yeah. That was the first coming, as we know, that's the story of the sea, right? This is going to be the story of the plantation years.
Names, love,
Yes.
beauty. Mm-hmm. Not just trauma,
Right.
and not just not giving it over to white supremacy.
Absolutely.
If you do all of that, I'm reminded of Toni Morrison. Morrison's effort to save the novel and her battle, we were talking about this, and her battle between the poets and the novelists.
Sure.
Song of Solomon became her homage
Yes.
to the form of the novel.
Sure.
That the novel can host the complexities and the immediacies
Absolutely.
of the density and depth of Black experience.
Right.
You talked a bit about how temporality flowed in this text. Talk to us a bit about how you constructed this novel
Sure.
to begin to host names,
Sure.
love, and beauty.
Sure. In fact, the problem that I had structurally, even with my publisher, is that this isn't a novel. But Western literary structures and canons, they have no word for this structural thing I did. In fact, when I turned in the manuscript, the editor said, we don't know how to market this. Like, what is this? And I said, it's the story of the Middle Passage. They said, yes, is this a novel? Is this an epic poem?
The category didn't fit.
It didn't at all. And I did that very intentionally because first generation Africans would not know Western literary forms, right? The way they told a story wouldn't sound like folks in the West telling a story, right? They would do it far more in the Jolly Griot tradition, right? And even that there is no protagonist in the book is a problem, right? And there's no first person, everything is we. So they were like, the first thing they were saying, well, who the hell is telling the story, right? And I said, does it matter? Though I knew the answer, right? And then they kept saying, no, really, it's like, and we were in this meeting, right, with this big table in these rooms, and they said, no, really, who's telling the story? I said, the ancestors are telling the story. And the ancestors are the only ones who can tell the story because they were there, right? But the ancestors can be both present and past, right? The ancestors are not limited by time and structure and dimension, right? So they told me the story, and so I get to write it, right? And they said, well, you know, an ancestor can't be a protagonist. I said, it's not the protagonist. We don't have a protagonist, right? So they just got all flustered, right? And I really wanted to crack up laughing, right? Because this notion that you in the West, you think you have defined and conceived of every literary form conceivable is the most arrogant thing possible, right? So we moved on and they said, well, listen, we really don't want to publish this book. And I said, you don't think this is a good book? And the answer is, he said, literally, I think this is probably one of the most beautifully written things I have ever read. But we don't know how to market it. I said, it'll sell. I'm telling you. They said, we do not agree with you. They told me this. They said, we do not think this is going to sell. We think it's too hard a story. We think it's too difficult. I said, no, sir. And they said, the only way we'll publish this is if you'll agree to give us first dibs of publishing your next novel. And they said, and we will not do it in hardback. I'm sorry, Dr. Black, we just don't. I said, no problem. Publish it paperback. It's the only book I have that's published in paperback. That's why it's in paper. There's no hardback edition, right? Yeah, well, right. And the book is probably now in its 17th or 18th printing. That editor, make a long story short, wrote me a beautiful letter back and said, we were wrong. I said, yeah, just like the people on this boat. People have so loved this book.
Yeah.
People have so eaten up this book. And I think part of the beauty of it is this book really tells us the birth of America. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the structure of this boat, these white crewmen on top, black folks in the hull of the ship, that would be the structure of America.
I think that gives us a good segue to our next conversation. History and memory. Mm-hmm. Now, some of you may use, we have some faculty here who may have used the coming in class, so we can come back to the coming in in our Q&A.
Oh, am I supposed to read from the coming?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, yes, sir.
We talked about this last night, too. In talking about the structure of America, mm-hmm. I want to read from your essay.
Uh-huh.
When we see us. When we see us. In many ways, this has been the blinding effect of pseudo-social progress. And black people have only been too willing to participate. We've softened the truth of racial terror for a contemporary generation, whom we've hoped wouldn't have had to bear the ugliness of America's racial character. We didn't tell our children the full story of our struggle because we wanted them to believe something that wasn't true, the American dream. They needed a dream,
yes,
because our reality was too painful. So we decided to lie, hoping to give black children a clean racial slate from which to function in America. But this move has come to haunt us. We now know that the American dream includes black subjugation. One can't have excess without others having less. We should have taught this to so-called black children as well. We have to understand the social markings of the haves and the have-nots. Survival is easier, I believe, if a person comprehends the nature of their environment and the challenge it imposes. This is why today's black and brown parents, like those in When They See Us, rail against kids who buck legal authority by asserting presumed agency. Cops kill colored kids who do that. Truth is, we blindfolded these children and sent them into a society that exploits their naivete to justify their demise. Now we seem unable to figure out why so many wander about confused and disillusioned. We've always known there's no real equality in America. We just didn't want to believe it. But if we accepted this ugly truth, we could have explained how and why we're still here. And most of us think we have nowhere to go. This means we're stuck. We're trying to pimp a system we know is rigged against us. Most of us simply wonder, what few will seep through the cracks. We are not of the illusion that most black people will ever prosper. In the section before the section I just read of that essay, you talk about Donald Trump and Central Park case. Talk to us about this enduring struggle, or this enduring structure of the whole and the deck.
I think where I'll start is it was really a very devastating decision for black people right after integration to try to hand black children a pristine, racially clean life. It was a horrible mistake, but I understand why our ancestors did it. I get it. I really do get it. I remember even watching this happen. There were parents who said, well, you know, I don't want my child to have to struggle the way I did. Devastating error. I don't want my child to suffer the way I did. Devastating error. I want my child to have more than I had. Devastating error. Because none of that produced more excellent children. None of that produced children who wanted to read more ferociously. It did not. It produced spoiled, entitled children. That's what it produced, and that's a lot of what we have now. Trying to save our children actually ruined them, right? And even now, the irony is, none of us thought we'd be back in Jim Crow times, you know, but here we are, right? But we don't have a populace of young people who are prepared for this kind of racial terror, right? People are getting laid off from jobs. Folks are worried. Folks are screaming and hollering, right? But what's so interesting, speaking of, is if we had children whom we had prepared, it's not their fault, we did it. If we had children whom we had prepared, what the children would do is what our ancestors did, right? When white folks get crazy, right? Because that's not new, right? You know, I wondered, what did they do when Lincoln was in office? What did black people do when Johnson was in office, who didn't want to sign this, you know what I mean? Yeah. Right? Well, the truth of the matter is we would have done, and that is we turn our back on these folks and we meet up at the church house, right? And we start conjuring the invisible. That's what we do, right? We conjure help from something that is greater than ourselves, right? Something that can fight wars in places we cannot go, right? That's what we do. But now, since we didn't raise these folk in the church, right? These folks, like the notion of, I don't know no connection to no invisible. I don't like how you do that. So what folks do now is get depressed and smoke weed, right? Really seriously, right? Instead of, you know, I was raised by my great-grandmother. And my great-grandmother used to tell me, when you get in trouble, conjure your song, right? I never really got that, Dr. Walker. I never really got that as a kid, but as a grown person, when I tell you that thing has saved me, that thing has saved me, it has saved me. Because there was a time when I was somewhere where I didn't have no business being, right? And it got tight, right? It got tight, baby, it got tight. I ain't gonna tell my business, right? But it got tight. And I remember, I might have been 20, 21, and I remember I got teary-eyed, and I remember closing my eyes, right? And all of a sudden, right, I began to sing, pass me not, oh gentle Savior. Baby, that thing got me through. Did you hear me? That thing got me through, right? And I came out all right, blah, 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 blah. But I realized the song was centering me. It was recentering me in the consciousness of my own people, right? Who knew how to pull power from places that you cannot see, right? What's messing us up now is what we can see looks crazy, and it is crazy, right? But the narrative of black people is there's something greater than all of that craziness, and that's your inheritance. Right? And as long as you can stay connected to that which cannot be seen, which is greater than all things seen combined, you'll be fine. Right? And so I wrote that essay because I want us to get back to some of our own spiritual technologies. Some of the things that we use, right? That kept us here, that kept us centered. And without doing that, we're going to be as crazy as the people we're looking at.
So we discuss your, as Dana would call it in CLA Journal, she called it a genre-defying book.
Yes.
Now in this essay, the most modern of forms.
Yes.
Because of its freedom.
Yes.
You've used the essay in this collection, and there's been sort of a resurgence, a renaissance in Baldwin studies, particularly Baldwin's essays.
Yes.
Talk to us about the essay as form and how it is speaking to this generation about the continuation or the perpetuation of those who are on deck and those who are in the hold.
I chose the essay form, in fact, because I wanted to say something very important, something very critical to America and to Black America particularly, but I didn't want it to get missed. I didn't want it to get dismissed in fiction, right? I didn't want people to be able to bypass it because, oh my God, this is something made up, right? That's one reason. But the second reason is because the essay is about the closest I could find to the sermonic form, right? Without it being sermonic, right? And also, speaking of Baldwin, I think I think Baldwin used the essay for this reason too, right? Baldwin was probably primarily an essayist, right? He wrote in every genre, but I think primarily an essay. But I think for this reason, and that is when it's time to talk consciousness, when it's time to really, really speak to the people's hearts, you've got to be able to say it unflowered. Right? You've got to be able to say it without the limitations of genre. And one of the things I think that even happened to Baldwin, I'm not sure people really love James Baldwin, right? This is the age of Baldwin, ironically, as everybody now is talking about Baldwin, right? Every possible person is a Baldwin scholar, right? Yeah. I won't call any names, right? Though I don't know that I agree with that. But people don't really love Baldwin. People are enamored by Baldwin's intelligence, right? But people don't really love James Baldwin, right? And the way I got clear about this, Doc, is all of these essays about Baldwin, all of these discussions of the brilliance of James Baldwin, oh my God, do you hear the language and all of this, et cetera. And what I realize is people are pimping Baldwin's intelligence because it's unmatched. But we don't really want the man. And here's how you know. I've yet to find the people who named their sons Baldwin. I've heard Ellison. I've heard Langston. Right? We don't name our son James Baldwin because we don't want them to be like Baldwin. Yeah. We don't want him to be like Baldwin, right? We're praying they might be as smart as Baldwin, right? But that's all we want.
Yeah.
That's all. We don't want Baldwin's beingness, right? We want Baldwin's performance, right? And I think that is insulting. Because for me, you can't get that level of brilliance, right, without queerness. The queerness is a requirement for that level sight. Why? Because queerness, this gay existence means that someone lives on the margins of the margin. And when you live that close to the edge, one perfects the dance. And you have to perfect it because any step in the wrong direction and you're done. Which means it has to be so excellent. See, other people get to live closer to the center, and you have so much more room to be raggedy. Right? Baldwin had no room. Baldwin, people thought he was ugly. People thought he was unattractive, right? So see, Baldwin was riding this intelligence for every piece he could get out of it. And he did, right? Which is one of the reasons I think Baldwin too had to find white lovers, because I think there were not sufficient people who could find beauty in him. Not black people, right? They could bow at his feet, they could be taught by him, but not be embraced by him, right? And so I want us to get to, I'm hoping in this book that I'm helping us to get to the place where we can leave room for the possibility of any black person's beauty in any form.
We end once again on that beauty, and we end once again with love and with the complexity of the human. And when we understand the fullness of Baldwin and understand the vision of being queer,
Yes.
then quite possibly we can begin to read your latest Isaac song.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
We'll start with a reading from Isaac's song. If someone shoots you, for instance, an apology doesn't mend the wound. If you don't tend it, it'll fester and kill you, not the one who shot you. The error is to think that revenge participates in healing. It doesn't. Most of us could have been healed years ago if we stopped waiting for a wounded person to do it. When you cut your finger, the body goes to work immediately, without your permission, to heal itself. It doesn't care who committed the act. It has the power to restore. So that's what it does. No need being mad at the knife. Perhaps it was too sharp. If so, get rid of it. Or be more careful next time. But how imprisoning is it to spend a lifetime screaming at a knife?
Wow.
From Baldwin to naming to Isaac's song that opens up with an estranged son and the death of a father. Talk to us about Isaac's song, a novel.
I mean, as you're reading it back to me, I'm like, who wrote that? Dang. I wrote Isaac's song because I wanted to give people a blueprint for how to heal with an ancestor, right? How do you come to terms with somebody who wounded you, who hurt you, who might have mistreated you, but now they are in the everlasting, right? And we have to do this because we have wounds from these people and from these eras, and it's true, right? Sometimes our ancestors were harsh people, right? Sometimes they were rough. Sometimes they made errors, right? It is true, right? But what's also true is sometimes they were excellent while they were doing it. See, that's the part that's hard to really wrestle with. How can a person be divine and flawed, right? How can mama have been holy, right, and errored, right? We usually try to figure out how to walk with one of them. Right? If mama was wonderful, let me just forget about how she might have messed up. Let me just forget about how she might have treated me. We do this thing of, she did the best she could. Right? And we think that then covers the multitude of errors and the ways mama treated it. And so I'm fine. Look, I'm good. We're not good. We're really not good. Right? But the opposite is true too. My daddy wasn't shit. He wouldn't even come see me. See, that's not fully true either, though we think it is. See, the thing I've learned that I'm really wrestling with in this book is the unreliability of memory. How memory is not facts, right? Memory is not really what happened to you. Memory is how you emotionally recall it, right? You know how you have friends or you have siblings and you remember some event that happened 20, 30 years ago and we don't have it the same way. Say, oh my God, you remember when we took the trip to such a place and John was in the car and you like, John didn't go with us. And you're like, wait a minute, yes he did. He would say, John wasn't with us. John wasn't even, and we're like, how is that possible? Because the truth of the matter is you're not recalling what happened. You're recalling the way you've processed it in such a way that it suits the fragility of your heart, right? So we're really recreating the thing so that we can live with it in such a way that it makes us feel good about it, right? And what's true is sometimes we've done this with our elders too, right? Like the same, like the daddy who wasn't shit, who didn't mean nothing to me. What's funny is the notion that the house you lived in, he paid for, stands in contrast to what you're saying. See, it doesn't go together. The memory doesn't go together. Mama never worked outside the house. So how did the man not love you? How was he raggedy? And every day you turned on the lights, they came on. See, it doesn't align. But we never think about the house note, right, as an act of absolute adoration, right? Mama was hard on us, but all of us graduated from high school, and then all of us went to college. Then something mama did is something you forgetting. See, it doesn't mean she wasn't hard, it means she was something else too, right? And I want us to put the two things together, right? Because if we're not careful, we're gonna throw our ancestors away because of the pain that some of them engendered in us, right? We're gonna dismiss some of them because of the way they were mean, yes. But see, some of them were mean because they absolutely were committed to making sure you stayed alive, right? At every cost. Like, I'll fight a demon in hell who tries to mess with my kids, right? But it took that during some eras and some times, right? So Isaac's song is about how Isaac comes to terms with who his father was, what his father meant to him. He thinks he doesn't even love the man. He's like, I don't even know why I'm crying at the man's funeral. Like, we weren't close. I thought I was gonna get to bury the man and whoo, I'm free now, right? But he's distraught, right? Because the truth of the matter is that memory won't agree with your emotional reactions always, right? And grief is not the notion that a person died, right? That's, we think it is. That's not really grief. Grief is when a person transitions and you are unhealed with them, right? And so this book is about how do you do that healing across time and space when the ancestor is not before you. And it happens in this book.
Reminded of that, the title of Chester Himes' two-part autobiography, The Quality of Hurt.
Yes, oh yes.
I mean, the thickness of that title, The Quality of Hurt.
Yes.
And how do you explore it? And you're exploring this hurt from the beginning,
Yes.
from a phone call.
Yes, yes.
Throughout the text.
Yes.
I'm going to hand it to you now.
Oh, Lord.
Because this is the reading.
Jesus.
I'm asking you to provide us a reading from Isaac's song as we prepare our questions. We have an opportunity to engage with Dr. Black. Take your time. I like day 2. That's why
I thought my father didn't like me. Unlike my mother, he never kissed me or read to me or hugged me. I wanted his attention, his applause to match his praise of the Kansas City Chiefs. They excited him. He'd sit before the TV on Monday nights cheering and cursing until his beloved team made a touchdown. Then he'd leap into the air screaming, Rachel, Rachel, come see this. Usually Mom ignored him. He never called for me. Occasionally I'd watch from the hallway though. I learned team names like the Dallas Cowboys and the Cincinnati Bengals. I also learned about MVPs like Tony Dorsett and Drew Pearson. Sometimes I leaned against the wall for hours, hoping Daddy might beckon me forward, but he never did. I watched, especially during playoff and Super Bowl season, trying to figure out the overall thrill of the game. Or perhaps I hoped to learn exactly what made my daddy happy. I'm not sure I ever discovered that. What I discovered was that I didn't like most boy things, including football and the color blue. Daddy painted my room blue and I hated it. I asked if it could be yellow and he said, hell no. Ain't no boy of mine with no yellow room. I said, I like it. And he said, not in this house you don't. So it stayed blue a long time. He bought toy soldiers and play guns, none of which I played with. And when he asked what I wanted, I said stuffed animals and books. He stared, undoubtedly wondering how he'd conceived a son like me. For years, the look of rejection lingered in his eyes. It was my mother I adored. She taught me first the joy of reading. She'd ease my finger across words and pictures that created worlds for me. Sometimes after I got pretty good, I'd read to her and she'd smile and nod when I pronounced difficult words correctly or read complex passages smoothly. Once I started reading, I never stopped. I traveled the universe in my mind. I learned about cultures, people, and traditions I'd never heard of. Books were my life. Mom used to say, you can live in the imagination when you can't live anywhere else.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we do have a few moments before we close out and have a microphone if you'd like to ask Dr. Black a question, a comment, or just thank him for his beautiful work.
Come on, sister.
Hi, Baba.
Hey.
I bring you greetings from your extended village of the Clearing.
Yes.
Grove Chronicles.
Yes.
Dr. Sampson is, of course, at the installation of my
Right,
dean.
right.
So we love you. On the way here, I was telling my son we were coming, and he's like, well, who is this? And I was like, well, this is, my elders, is our elders.
Yes,
it's our
ma'am.
community elder. And he said, but he's not old. And so
I love that.
I know. So I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about what makes an elder,
Yes.
and how do we embody those things as elders becoming so that we can make sure that
Absolutely.
we're ready to take that step.
Absolutely.
when it's that time.
I'm gonna tell you how profoundly deep God is. I had a class on this past Saturday in Atlanta, right? And the name of the class is What Makes an Elder an Elder. So there are three things I always say that really makes an elder an elder. Number one, an elder is a person who dreams for the children in a community. If an elder does not dream for the children, I was looking at this young man sitting here. He's probably about 8 or so. Is he 8? 10. And I was staring at him because I was looking for kids in the room, right? And in my head, right, I see him at 21. See, if an elder cannot foresee a child's future, you don't have an elder. An elder is supposed to look forward for a child, right, and tell them what they see. So a child can long for and want to move into that invisible thing we call the future, right? That's number one. Number two, if an elder is not consciously and intentionally about the business of making the community better, you have an older person, but not an elder. See, a person is not an elder just because they get older. Right? An elder is very intentional, right, about the things in the community, right, that make the community whole or healthy. See, an elder goes to PTA meetings but has no children in that school, right? An elder is the person at church who says, son, what's your name? Caleb. An elder says, hey, Caleb, how you doing? And the elder says, Caleb, how your grades, boy? Because I'm interested, right, in the way he's moving right now, right? Because I want to make sure I support that, right? I want to make sure I elevate him. I want to make sure I lift him up. I want to make sure I exalt him. He doesn't need to know why. I'm supposed to see that. I don't need him to see it. All I need him to see is that I'm interested in it. Because what's going to happen in a minute is on report card day, he's going to look for me. He's going to say, Dr. Black, you want to know my grades? See, because he, in his spirit, what he knows is somebody is prepared to sing my excellence. And that's the role of an elder, right? If you got children and the elders don't have nothing to say to them, you don't have no elder. You don't have no elder. No way, no way. And the third thing that I think is extremely, extremely important, right, is that an elder is also one, right, who is always looking for a lesson. An elder is always trying to figure out what God is doing, right? An elder is one who studies nature. An elder is one who notices that spring came 2 weeks earlier this year than last year. See, all of those things are critical in terms of how you maintain a community and how you maintain the health of a community, right? An elder is one who sees a couple, they've been married for 9 years, right? But you don't really see any emotional or any romantic exchange between them. An elder says, "How you two doing?" Why? Because we need that union. See, why do we need that union? Because that union is going to produce children very often. And I got some kids too. My son can't marry my daughter. See, an elder is one who's very conscious of the fact, right, that we need the whole community. See, have y'all heard that, it takes a village to raise a child? That is not the proverb. That is a misquoting of that proverb. The proverb says it takes a whole village to raise a child. But the whole, right, doesn't mean entire. It means healthy. It takes a healthy village to raise a child. And if an elder is not committed to that, you just have a person aging.
Questions? We got a microphone right there. Go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Black. Hey, man, how are you? I'm good. Can you speak to, for Isaac's song, why you chose Kansas City, Missouri for starting the story there, and why that might be tied to your history or the history of Kansas City and the complexities of that?
First, introduce yourself.
I'm Darby. I'm in the Masters of Divinity program.
Fantastic. Nice to meet you, Darby. I chose Kansas City because I was born there, right? But I also chose Kansas City because about half of the state of Arkansas, black people migrated there, right? And my father was among them, right? And I was very much interested in also the tension that the migration of black people from the South North created in black families. See, a lot of black people moved out of the South and went to out of rurality and moved to urban centers. But the urban centers disappointed them, right? And also, no, you're not old enough. Years ago, between maybe the 1940s and the 1980s, black people would send children south for the summer, all summer long. It would just be floods of kids just all on the trains and buses or cars where their parents would bring them to drop them off, and then the parents would leave. Like the day after school is out, you going south, right? Some of that was an issue of safety, because when kids would get out of school in the North, there were no parental folks in the community, right, to watch after them. But there's another reason too, and that was they were also trying to connect black urban children to Southern heritage and Southern roots, and to grandmamas and granddaddies and great-grandpas and great-uncles. Do some of y'all recall this? Right. And I'm from a rural place in Arkansas, right? And over the summer, we'd inherit 50 or 60 kids. It was wonderful, because we'd get playmates all summer, right? And workmates, right? And so I was very much interested in what happens when this countryman, Jacob, migrates to this place called Kansas City and births a son who knows nothing about these Southern roots and knows nothing about this Southern heritage, which really means he is unfamiliar with the context that defined his father, right? And then Isaac now starts looking for his father to be a certain kind of way, but he cannot figure out why his daddy won't kiss him on the top of his head, right? They don't kiss no boys in the country. And the list goes on and on and on and on, right? So I was really kind of playing with this tension of not just black fathers and sons, but even the way that space and time and geography, right, contributed unto this in ways that neither the son nor the father could explain. But I wanted us as readers to see it, right? Yeah. Yes, sir, absolutely.
I think we have time for one more.
Come on, sister.
She has a lot of notebooks. Just to pick up on the recording.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
And good evening, Dr. Black.
Yes, ma'am.
I also bring you greetings from Dr. Melva Sampson in
Yes.
the clearing. She told me
Pink
to say
Road,
that.
yes.
So Pink Road, and from hearing you on Mondays on the
Oh,
Karen
the
Hunter
Karen
show.
Hunter,
Yep.
yes. Oh, y'all can do? Oh my goodness. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So God bless you and
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. My question,
I know what you're gonna ask me. I bet you I know what you're gonna. I'm gonna see if I know. I could
right.
be wrong. I could be wrong.
I
Are you
wanna
asking me
kn-
about the end of Isaac's song?
I'm not gonna get you on that.
Okay.
But I'm going.
Okay.
I want to know, how did Isaac know to do the libation ceremony?
Because Isaac took a class on African Studies at Lincoln.
Okay. All right.
Remember?
Okay.
So Isaac studied African traditions, African rituals, etc. at class in Lincoln, and all of a sudden now, right?
Becomes-
He absolutely needs something. But also, if
Okay.
did you read "Don't Cry for Me"?
I did.
Okay. Remember,
Yes.
Isaac has this spiritual gift.
Yes. I'm
Right,
seeing
that
the
he's a seer.
ancestors.
That's
Yeah.
right. He didn't know what it was, and he didn't know what to call it. Right, but once he goes to Lincoln and study these traditions, he's like, that's what this is.
Okay.
Right. So when he starts pouring this libation, it's because again he studied that. His father didn't know what it was. Right. But I think what's beautiful is that he puts it into action. Right. That it's not just something in the classroom. It wasn't just something he learned, from Malodoma Soul Mare or whatever. But now he's pouring this libation because he's really, literally trying to conjure his father's spirit. Because he's trying to heal both himself and his dad.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And that's exactly what happens. Right? Because it's really his father leading and guiding him. And here's how you know. I don't want to ruin anybody's reading. Whatever. You're
Spoiler alert.
Right. Remember when his father dies, the moment he hears his father dies, on page 1, a flock of red cardinals
Yes.
gathers outside his window, right? That red cardinal comes again at the end, right? That's Jacob,
Very good. Oh,
right?
Wow.
All red cardinals are male.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, the females are brown,
Beautiful.
right? So literally, the men gather right at the beginning of this novel, if you will,
That's
right?
right.
Hoping and praying for Isaac's transformation. So his father is with him this whole journey, right? Which is true for our ancestors, but Isaac doesn't know it, right? And remember, he even saved his father too. Remember when the bird fell out of the tree in Chicago?
Yes.
Yeah. That was Isaac restoring his father.
Oh my God. Listen. Okay, that was good.
Yes, ma'am.
The last question, you talk a little bit about rushing the story. Isaac didn't want to rush the story. He wanted a certain ending. What happens if a writer prematurely begins to write or forces the writing, right? What would have happened?
At least I can tell you what happens for me.
Okay.
Right? My writing process is I always hear my characters, right? I hear them as clearly as I hear you talking to me right now. Okay. And if I try to rush the narrative, they go silent. Because now, really, I'm putting my own voice into their mouths, right? And so I have to stop. And when I stop, they'll come back, right? Which is the only way for me, I can assure that every character isn't me, right? Because if every character is you, then you don't have a book, right? You're really doing an autobiography.
Wow.
Right? Which is why I often write characters I dislike. I don't like them at all, not even a little bit, but they're in the story. And they have to be, and I argue with them, I wrestle with them. Oh my God. I fight with characters all the time, cussing them out. Right? But they're in the story and they're telling me what they say, and I have to write it that way. Right? That's my process. Right? And sometimes I have gotten to the I've been writing for years and years on a book, and it's like, I'm just ready to finish this, right? And so I'll try to rush the ending because I just want to be done. But the minute I do it, I know it's not right. I know it's not right. And so I say, okay, let me just back up, right? The last 20 pages, delete. Yeah. In fact, when I started Isaac's song, I started Isaac's song with Isaac writing letters to his father. If you read Don't Cry for Me, Jacob writes letters to Isaac. And so in response, Isaac was writing these letters back to his father. Mm-hmm. I got maybe 310 pages in, right? And I knew, I said, this is not right. It's not right. Because the letter writing was Jacob's form and his structure. It wasn't Isaac's form. The voice wasn't right, and I just knew it wasn't right, but I just wanted to get done. And what I had to do, right, was to start all over again at page 1.
Wow.
And that's what I did. But 310 pages was a lot of writing, right? But it didn't work. It just did not work. I still have it now. I refuse to delete it. I'm so mad about it, right? But it didn't work. But when I started this, and it was the voice of the therapist, I said, this is it.
Yeah.
Because that therapist won't let Isaac be a victim, right? And the therapist is always urging him on and urging him forward. And so I think the trope of the therapist really worked.
Yeah.
I pray it did.
It did. It was good for me.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wow.
Thank you for the gift of your presence.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the gift of friendship. But most importantly, thank you for the gift of your grace
Yes, sir.
in this moment and in all moments.
Yes, sir.
And we also want to thank a very special person who helped pull all of our programs in African American Studies at Wake Forest here together. Sarah Goldstein.
Yay,
Sarah is
thank you,
our
Sarah.
amazing colleague. So thank you, Sarah. And I want to also thank our colleagues at North Carolina A&T.
Yes.
Who have invited you to
Yes,
be their
yes.
scholar and activist in residence at their Center
Yes,
for
yes.
Social Justice.
Jelani
And
Favors has a message for you.
Jelani Favors, yes. We are thankful, and I was so glad to have him here for our first year
Ah,
of
fantastic.
African American Studies here at Wake Forest. We have a reception, and we also have a book signing. So if you are colleagues at Newhouse, a Book House, the Book House, independent bookseller right here in Reynolda Village, that's part of the campus of Wake Forest University. We have our colleagues at the Book House here. You can purchase some of Dr. Black's books, and we also have a nice reception so we can continue the conversation. Thank you so much. We have our dear colleague Terry Pickens coming on April 10th for our last book talk for the evening, and she'll be in conversation with our dear colleague, Professor Shanna Green Benjamin, here at Wake Forest. So come join us again on April 10th for our next book talk this semester. And once again, thank you, brother.
Thank you all tremendously.